What is good in your world? I am so happy to be connecting across cyberspace for today's discussion. Welcome. I am your host, Dr. Andrea Pennington. I am the Chief Psychedelic Officer for Innate Vitality. I am an integrative physician, creator of the attunement process and the cornerstone process, and the host of the Conscious Evolution podcast. One of the things that I am passionate about is helping people heal from trauma, reclaim your sovereignty, and start designing the life of your dreams so that you can live heroically and die with no regrets. I know that's a lot, that's a mouthful, and it's a lot for me as well. I mean, just imagine, I'm the one over here living it. So, today we are talking about how to silence the inner critic, how you can end negative self talk. So, I know that you have a dialogue happening in your mind. I know you have it because we all do. All of us humans seem to have this running commentary in our minds. Now, sometimes that self talk can be encouraging, it could be positive, cheering you on. But many of us have a little gremlin or several that beats you down, tears you apart, rips you to shreds. How many other ways can I say it? So I'm curious if you're willing to type into the chat. How many of you already know that you have an inner critic, a negative dialogue that's happening? I'm going to say hello to Chuck in the United States, in Alabama. Hello to Trevor up at Omega in New York. And hey, Gelu, very good to have you here from Romania. And Jenna, I don't know where you are in the world, but welcome. Very glad to have you here. And yes, I got this sort of revelation about this inner critic just a couple of years ago. I consider myself somewhat positive, but a few years ago, my daughter heard me say something. I think it was, "You're such an idiot." Like, Dre. And my daughter stopped me. And she was like, "Don't talk to my mother like that." And it kind of caught me off guard because she's right. I shouldn't be talking to her mother like that. So this begs the question about your internal dialogue. Now, there's some of the things that you're conscious of because maybe, like me, you actually say it out loud, like, "Ugh, you're such an idiot. Oh my God, you always," right? Okay, so I see some people typing into the chat. Yes, you have a little bit of a negative self-talk. Karen, thank you for being willing to say so. Hey, Ruth, up in Edinburgh, welcome. Cindy, also in the US, glad to have you here. Vicky as well, welcome from Belgium. Love it. And yes, Margareta, you know our Sienna. She's more than smart. She is, yeah, she's a clever one. But it really forced me to like walk my talk. I'm here encouraging you and all of my clients to be mindful of the narrative. Your personal narrative is the story you tell yourself about yourself. And so it really made me go within to say, gosh, why do I beat myself down? Why do I call myself an idiot? Now, it's great if you can identify those voices from your inner critic. Typically, the inner critic is judging your appearance, the way you speak, the way you turn in your projects, maybe how you are socially or in public, maybe in relationships. Often the inner critic is judging our body or our behaviors, like how much we've eaten or how sloppy we are, right? So those are the things that might be obvious to you. But as I just wrapped up a 2-day intensive training called Stories with Soul, I really teased up this idea that we need to get a little bit deeper, even into the subconscious, to understand what are the beliefs, what are the stories, the narratives and the different parts of us that carry them. So today, we're talking about the inner critic, but of course, you also have an inner child. Maybe you have an inner cheerleader. Lately, I've been giving my inner cheerleader more fuel to keep me positive. You may also find that you've got an inner procrastinator that says, oh, let's just do it tomorrow. You may have an inner perfectionist that has its own voice. In my case, my inner critics back in the day, I had like several of them. And as I started to really tease out these messages that I was hearing, which was during a coaching program, I started to realize that I had multiple inner critics, and they each had something to say about different things. One that would judge my writing, so it's an inner editor and critic. One that would judge my productivity and just beat me down if I didn't get very much done. And what is interesting is when you look at where they started. So, Jenna, like you, I've had an inner procrastinator. I often tell my beloved or my kid, like, if you see me washing the walls or scrubbing something extra, I'm procrastinating. I mean, I like a clean house, but I have someone who comes and cleans it. So if I'm doing extra cleaning, I'm procrastinating. But have you ever started to dig in and ask questions about where do these inner voices come from? Where did they get installed? And what is their motivation? In my case, you've heard this probably many times about my upbringing with a dysfunctional family, but I recognized when I started to really look at the voices and look at the messages that were coming through. You're an idiot. What a dumbass. I can't believe you did that. Why didn't you do more? You should have. What was interesting was I could trace back the words to specific people and the tone of voice from specific people. So it may have been my father, it may have been my mother, a coach that I had in high school, a director that I had when I was studying theater and film. So I had all these voices that had different critical angles. Anybody else have that as well? So what we notice when we start to do this insight work, and insight is the number one resilience trait, is we start to look at where do these voices come from? When did they get installed? And then we can dialogue with them. Yes, you can have a dialogue with your inner critic, especially if you want to stop having it beat you down. Because I don't know about you, but for me, when I was getting beat down, I felt demoralized. Like the projects that I wanted to go out for, I didn't have the energy and enthusiasm. And then my procrastinator would kick in and I'd find myself doing something else. Oh, besides cleaning, maybe I'd be on the iPad, playing one of these like number matching games. Or I'd find that my perfectionist would kick in. And my perfectionist part would have me tweaking and adjusting and editing and working on a project that was already good enough to go. And that would slow down my progress. And guess what would happen after that? Another inner critic voice would come in here like, I can't believe you just. So for me and for my clients, I invite you to investigate and start to have a dialogue. So when my daughter, Sienna, said, don't talk to my mother like that, I went in and I started to ask, okay, what part of me feels the need to like shame me and make me feel like a loser or label me as a loser? And you'll find that for most of us, we internalized the voices of parents, caregivers, coaches, other authority figures, even your siblings, because you might have needed it for survival. So that's your number one clue to finding out what the inner critic's motive is. Was their criticism tied to a point in time where you needed that for survival? For example, if you happen to have an abusive parent and they're telling you, gosh darn it, clean up this mess. Or maybe you're crying and they say, you keep crying and I'm going to give you something to cry about. You may have learned at a very young age to keep everything neat, to stay quiet, to not cry, to not ask for getting your needs met. And if you did, if you slipped up in the slightest bit, you may have had this inner protective part, that critic, that starts harassing you because in the past, your very survival may have depended on it. Maybe you needed it to fit in. Maybe you needed to be accepted and not bullied or teased or rejected. So understanding that, in my opinion, is a first step towards accepting the inner critic. Now, I know that the title of this talk is Silence Your Inner Critic, and I'm actually inviting you to dialogue with them before you try to silence them. Because how many of you have ever tried to tell a part of you to shut up or try to extract it and force yourself to push through fear or push through pain? You might have gotten something done only to come back around and have a backlash of some sort. Maybe your body collapsed. Maybe you went into total chronic fatigue or some sort of autoimmune condition flared up. So what we typically advise, particularly in the world of internal family systems, is to get to know these protective parts, and in particular, the inner critics. And I'm just going to use it as plural. Maybe you only have one critic. But I bet if you did some investigating, you'd find out, like me, that there's different ones that come in at different times. So for me, I found that it was very helpful to understand what their intentions were, to accept them as, okay, I get it. Based on the information that you have from the past, that is a valid concern to keep me safe, to help me fit in, to make me look good, or whatever that critic or that energy is coming at you. Once we move into the next phase, we've gotten to acceptance and understanding. If you can actually reflect that in an inner dialogue to that critical part, you can say, wow, I get it. This is really familiar. And I get that you really want to keep me safe. I get that. You might even thank them, but at least to share that you understand is key. Once we go into that acceptance and understanding, then we can move to the next phase, which is compassion. Do you know how much energy it takes to keep beating someone down, to always be vigilant, looking for every mistake, every little thing that you do wrong, every threat? That takes so much energy. And so when you can accept, understand their perspective, and start to dialogue, you can say, you know what? I get what you're trying to do. I don't necessarily need that anymore. And you can take a break. Now, that protective part of you may not believe you, because generally these protectors, that inner critic, that inner bully, is protecting a younger, more immature, vulnerable, exiled part. It might even be your inner child, your inner toddler, your inner infant, your inner teenager. So these protective parts, they are fulfilling a function. They feel like they need to protect these younger parts. And so as you'll see in my free real self-love sessions, on the second Tuesday of the month, I host the Real Self-Love Live. We just met last evening, and I lead a discussion and a guided meditation. And some of these guided meditations are directly connecting you to these inner parts of you. You can access many of these inner child meditations either in the Real Self-Love movement or also on Insight Timer. So just go to insighttimer.com /Dr. Andrea, and you'll access them. But you'll see in these guided meditations that I lead you in a process to quiet the body and the brain, to get in touch with your heart and some compassion, and then you can start a dialogue. So we literally can dialogue with the inner child to understand what happened. Why did that part of you take on the belief that you maybe were vulnerable or weak or dumb or defective? And you can also have a dialogue with these parts that are trying to protect you. Today, we're talking about the inner critic, but it could also be your inner procrastinator, or the part of you that kicks into perfection, or the people pleaser. And when we have that dialogue between these various parts, one of the advanced things that we do in internal family systems is to unburden these parts. So the part of you that has been holding on to pain, to trauma, to the belief that you're bad or wrong or defective, holding on to the emotion of shame, the parts of you that have carried out these roles and these responsibilities in a process that we call unburdening, they can actually give up those roles, responsibilities, and painful emotions. And then they can either retire or they can take on new roles. And it's quite a process. It reminds me very much of work that I learned early in my career in Gestalt therapy, where you literally might have two chairs. And that's often what we do in workshops. So for example, you might literally put a chair in front of you, and that would be designated the chair for the inner critic. And you get up, sit down in that chair, and then spew whatever criticism or whatever is on the inner critic's mind out to, we call it the inner target, the chair that's in front of you. And then pick yourself up and move to the chair. And you're in the chair as that part that's been targeted. Could be the inner child, could be the part that binge ate Ben and Jerry's last night. And then this person in this target chair gets to express whatever they need to express. And so in Gestalt therapy, you're doing this sort of back and forth from the adult chair to the inner child chair to the procrastinator or the perfectionist or the critic. And having that sort of dialogue, it may sound weird to you, but it can actually help to create more space and allow some of these parts to come up to date. And I agree with you, Jacqueline. It's been so long since I've seen you. This totally does need to be taught in schools. Absolutely. If only young people today, or if only I had learned some of this stuff earlier in life, I wouldn't have had as many problems with this inner perfectionist and this compulsive need to prove myself. Of course, if it were taught back then I wouldn't necessarily be here with you now. Although maybe I'd be doing something else really cool. So does this make sense to you? I'm guessing that it does. This idea of being able to have a dialogue amongst these parts. Yeah? So Ruth has a question. She says, there was not much verbal abuse by my parents, but my mom dropped me from a shopping trolley when you were small, and dad pulled me off the toilet and dragged me by a limb downstairs. Could these lead me to self-criticizing? Oh, Ruth, my heart is with you. So sorry that you had these painful experiences. So absolutely, being dragged or dropped could absolutely create the response inside that you need to be careful. Depending on your age, you might have even blamed yourself. Quite often when we're small, we assume that the adults know everything and that if something bad happens, it must be our fault. So it is possible that you have absorbed and created some sort of critical voice that's always looking out for ways that you might screw up again, or ways that, yeah. So that could be it. But we all have so many experiences, even from very trivial, just one-time experiences like being teased at school or messing up when you had to recite spelling words. Those things can also get implanted and create this part that takes on the role of criticizing you and beating you down. Yeah. So glad to know that this is making sense. So these are the processes we go through. We kind of ask, what are the common phrases that we hear, so that we try to consciously tune in to the inner critic. You can also do this with feelings. If you find yourself feeling defeated, feeling low, you may not be conscious of a narrative that's playing back there, but feelings are always held in place by some thoughts, beliefs, or words, some sort of a narrative. So, whatever you're feeling, if you're feeling somewhat disempowered, the next step is to kind of look at, what is my internal dialogue like? Is there a part of me that's trying to beat me down or telling me that I'm not worthy, or what have you? So, bringing more of this consciousness to your internal language, identifying where it may have come from, dialoguing with the younger part of you, or even the inner critic themselves, you can also start to make deals. So, when I do this kind of work with clients, it's in guided meditation sessions. Like sometimes I'll be with a client on Zoom and I will lead them through the guided process so that they can tune in and access these different parts. And then I'll lead them and guide them in ways that they can communicate with these various parts. And you can also do this yourself when you listen to some of the guided meditations, which you can get many of them on my website. When you listen to these guided meditations, you'll hear me leading you through a process to connect with these parts and have a dialogue, hearing what they need to hear, maybe even giving them what they needed back then that they didn't get. And you can do this in journaling. You can write from the perspective of the critic, like give your critic 20 minutes to just let it rip so that it finally gets expression. Because for most of us, we don't like the feeling of being criticized. And oftentimes when that feeling comes up, we want to escape from it. So I don't know about you. What do you do to escape when you feel bad? Well, for many of my clients, eating was a surefire way to distract themselves and to create calm, getting that little burst of dopamine and serotonin until another critic would come in and criticize them for binging or not getting done whatever they said they were going to get done. So having this sort of dialogue in meditation, in the 2 or 3 chair technique, or through writing can be really helpful. And when you get to the point of being able to bring in compassion for these parts, like recognizing that they've been carrying these wounds, they've been enacting these behaviors and holding these beliefs for most of your life, or at least decades, then if you're able to just bring as much of your authentic self and your heart of compassion to the process, letting these parts be seen and heard and understood can often relax their grip. Then you can either invite into your meditative process your own personal oracle, a Yoda type figure. I call it a wisdom figure, and ask for insight or help. Like, how do we navigate this? Or if you can call forth your highest and best self, you might actually have the dialogue from your highest and best and say, you know what? These behaviors are now costing me so much. So I know that your intention is to prevent me from screwing up and looking bad because you're worried that I might lose my job or not get the hot person I'm interested in. But your behaviors are really draining me and dragging down my energy. So how about we find another way to give me that sense of protection? Or if you've been able to dialogue with your inner child and help them realize that the threat is no longer there. I share all the time that when I did one of these deep meditative processes and connected with my inner child, she was just a little toddler, and I grabbed her in my arms and I told her, Mom and Dad got it wrong. You believed that you needed to be perfect, that you needed to follow all of their rules, and that you needed to perform well in order to be loved. And I said, they got it wrong. And then I was able to show that little inner toddler love and compassion and connection and play to help her feel safe, to help her feel appreciated and adored. And through the process of doing this several times, and even inviting her out on a play date, like, what would you rather do than sit here hiding behind the curtains? Over time, that helps us build a sense of trust and safety. And then I can have a dialogue with my inner critic to say, listen, little baby Dre, she knows now that Mom and Dad are not God. They got it wrong. We don't have to follow their rules. We can now follow what's aligned with our heart, my soul, my values, what I want to do. So I had a conversation with the perfectionist. I'm like, what I do is excellent. It doesn't need to be perfect. And perfect doesn't actually even exist. Now, I don't know about your inner critics or any of your protective parts, but sometimes just telling them one thing one time is not enough because they've got lifetimes of evidence. And so we have to also stack up the evidence to give them the confidence that what we're saying is true. So in my case, I made a list. I made a list of the past year. I do this with a coaching practice that I usually do in January of every year. And it involves making a list of all the things that went well. And I was able to point out the things that I was proud of, the things that people had appreciated and congratulated me for, the things that I know really turned out excellent. And I was able to say, and they're not perfect. And that's okay. I didn't die. I didn't get shamed or kicked off stage or, kicked out of a meeting. I didn't lose money. I didn't lose my life. All those things that the perfectionist was so worried about. I was able to show evidence that relaxing on that perfectionism could be okay. So we show the past evidence in your journaling or in a meditation. And then the next step is to go out and prove it. The next time that you're going to take on a task where your perfectionist might come up or your critic might come up, you can say, I see you're here. Okay. Well, today I have decided I'm going to create this email and not check it 50 times. I've got my spell check on. 2 times is going to be fine. And you do that so that the inner protector can see that you didn't die. And even if someone wrote back to you and said, oh my God, you forgot the link. Oh my heavens. When the pandemic hit and I had one of my staff members leave the company, and I had all these emails that I had to start doing and programming newsletters. And I remember thinking, okay, I think I've checked every link, and I sent something out, and someone was like, emailed me right away, hey, I tried to click on the link to register. And I'm like, oh. So I got it wrong. But guess what? It's not like I got hate mail. People were just like, it was wrong. And so what I did is I resent the email, highlighted, sorry for the error, sorry for the confusion, here's the correct link. I think this even happened last week as well. But back then, when this first happened, it was like, oh my God, what are they going to think of me? But over time, I showed the inner critic, like, it's not a big deal. We're doing a great job. We're doing a great job. So it was, just checking the chat here. So for me, it was a process. And over time, I got better at it. And the thing that was kind of telling for me that I knew that I had arrived at a point of freedom from my inner perfectionist, I was doing one of these guided meditations, and one of the ones to connect with parts. And again, you can check out some of my guided meditations on Insight Timer. And I was doing this guided meditation. I was connecting in with my parts, and it was like, all right, anybody in there who wants to shake things up, tell me that I've done something wrong or bad. And, I heard a little bit of a rumbling and kind of addressed it. It was just a part that was like, well, you forgot to do. And I was like, thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Instead of beating myself up, I didn't have a critic that came in here like, "Pfft, there you go again." And as I was sitting there, I kind of thought about this like, hey, perfectionist, where are you? I haven't heard from you in a while. And I just sat there in the meditation, kind of waiting. And then I got this vision. And I saw my inner perfectionist laying on a beach in Greece and just getting this massage. And I was like, whoa, you're on vacation, huh? Like, where are you? What's going on? And in this vision, in this meditation, the perfectionist said, oh, I'm just over here getting a massage by this Greek god. And in the vision, the masseur leaned down and said, Madam, I'm Egyptian. So maybe you don't get that. I'm saying that my inner perfectionist made a mistake, would have normally had everything right. Instead of knowing exactly where her massage therapist was from, she made a mistake. Anyway, for me, it was kind of hilarious. I had to crack up like, wow, my inner perfectionist has gone off to the beach. Good for her. And now I find that it's no longer a compulsion to look for perfection, to tweak things over and over. I still have a desire to make things nice and make things pretty, to get things right. But before, I operated on a 100% or 0% scale where I felt things had to be absolutely perfect. And now I can actually appreciate it, even if I get just 80% of the things done or the things well, the way that I really wanted them. So it's been a process, and that's okay. So Suzanne, thank you for your comment. Tea with Sadness. I've never heard of that book, but nice that it's helped you to have conversations with your parts. And Kashina, thank you so much. Glad that this is supportive. And hey, Shaf, good to see you. Welcome. So what questions do you have about this concept? Is there anything that you want me to dig a little bit deeper? Because one of the things that we do when we start to make deals or ask the inner critic to stop, you can make a deal for a limited time. You could say, you know what? For the next hour, stop beating me down. I need to move forward with what I'm working on. And that is how you can silence the inner critic and end the negative self-talk. Or sometimes what we'll do is say, all right, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. Let me know all the things that are, frustrating you about what I've done or whatever. Because sometimes these parts, they will pick up on things that we're not necessarily conscious of. And that's okay. But once we set limits and boundaries, we actually can silence the inner critic. And most importantly, what we want to do is start to build up an inner cheerleader or your inner loving parent or an inner compassion figure. You'll see this in the work that I do over on Insight Timer and in the Real Self-Love movement. I can go in deeper and answer your questions as well as lead guided meditations that can help you get to these points of resolution. So, any advice for undoing comments made to our kiddos? That is a great question, Kashina. The best thing that you can do is have a dialogue. So, exactly as I'm talking about dialoguing with your internal parts, this is the same corrective measure we can do for our children, whether we have been the ones that said something that might have been harming or other people. Because when we look at the work of resilience and post-traumatic stress or complex PTSD, what we notice is children who go through adversity are not destined to have PTSD and all of the other dramatic things that happens when people have adverse childhood experiences, like I did. If we have a responsive, attuned caregiver, a caregiver who's tuned into the energy of the child, their emotions. So rather than telling them, oh, don't you worry about that, I think you're special, or they didn't mean that, rather than dismissing what has come up, even if it was your own saying, something you said or did to the child, the best thing we can do for our children is to be with them and ask them, whoa, how did that make you feel? What's going on? Or just to mirror back what you see. I see this is really hard for you. You look really sad. Can you tell me what you're feeling? So just like we would do with the internal conversations where I'm asking you to let them vent, get out whatever they need to get out, providing a safe container, not judging them, not dismissing them, not shaming them, and not blaming them, letting them get it out. And then mirroring back a sense of compassion. Like, I'm really sorry that happened. I'm so sorry that you feel this way, or I'm so sorry that that hurt you so deeply. And then, and only then, can you offer contrary advice. So rather than just saying, oh, they didn't mean that, oh, that's just the way they talk, but they didn't mean it, or whatever. Instead, we might say, gosh, that's really horrible what they said. Those kids were really mean. And I really think you're great. Or even if you did make a mistake, you can learn from that mistake and you can also repair it. So we offer that sort of repair. Does that make sense? Hopefully that does. Next question from Laura. Thank you. I'm glad you love the talk. And she says, I'm struggling with making a very important decision job-wise and not able because my inner critic is huge. I have difficulties in decision making. Any advice? Well, Laura, I would invite you to explore where that came from. In other words, go back in your timeline and think, when was the first time you found it difficult to make a decision? Or tracing back, when was the first time you made a decision and got punished for it? Either because things didn't work out the way you wanted, you made a decision and it backfired, you made a decision and someone shamed you or blamed you, criticized you or rejected you. Find out when was the first time you found it hard to make a decision, and that will generally tell you when that indecisive part came on. That indecisive part that's kind of like, no, if you do that, do that, that's typically what I would do. If we can identify the original event or the source wound, then we can work with those parts to find out, what are they protecting you from? Make sense? And then going through the journaling and the meditation process to help. And then ultimately, you're going to want to access the part of you that has an inner knowing. Maybe it's your intuition, maybe it's your heart, of what is the right decision for you. And again, if you do the attunement meditation, you'll find that when you ask for insight and inspiration, it can come in multiple ways. You can invite in a wise counselor Access your own job resource person, who could come into this meditative experience and help guide you. Maybe it's asking your body, what would it feel like to know the right way to go? And you can also ask for signs from the universe. We talk a lot about putting things in a God box. Write down on a piece of paper the thing you're struggling with, put it in a little box, and surrender it to the divine, saying, okay, I'm leaving this now for you. Guide me, show me, or ask for a sign, a very clear sign. And if you can't find the original source, that's okay. Just see if you can find the first time that you felt that feeling. Go through the meditation and ask, okay, I see that you're feeling this way. Tell me about it. And generally, those parts will tell you why they're holding on to those beliefs or fears. And that I find is really, really helpful. So one of the things that we do when we want to start creating a better mindset and better self-talk, I outline this in the Real Self-Love Handbook, which is also available as an audiobook. One of the things that we do is we develop what is called a personal success mantra. So I told you about this coaching process that I went through, where we outline all the things that went right for an entire year. And then we also look over the past year and write down everything that went wrong. And we look at what are the underlying beliefs and paradigms that made them possible. And from there, we can start to identify what are our paradigms of possibility. What are the clear statements that we could make that are true about our capabilities? And what are the things we need to watch out for so we don't go back down that road of creating confusion or mistakes? So in August, I am going to be leading a workshop on Insight Timer, and I'll be taking you through this process of creating your own personal success mantra. So on August 12th, it is a 2-hour workshop. I'll take you through the process step by step. We'll do it together in real time. And right now, you can get 50% off using mantra 50 when you go to checkout. So you can check me out at insighttimer.com/Dr. Andrea, and you can enroll in this workshop. The coupon code is only good for a couple of weeks, so don't delay. But in this workshop and in this process, you will have a very clear framework of how to create affirmations for your soul. So I don't know if any of you are participating right now, but on Insight Timer, there is a 30-day affirmation challenge. This is totally free, and I am one of 10 teachers who have submitted some affirmations that you start in the morning. You listen first thing in the morning, it kind of sets the tone for the day. But if you've ever done affirmations and you felt like they're fake, like I'm saying this over and over again, but no part of me believes it. Or one of the favorite things that the inner critic likes to say is, yeah, but. So if you've got any yeah buts coming up, like you say, I am worthy of love, and your inner critic comes in, well, yeah, but nah, 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 then what I find is it means that you're working against yourself. You're reciting an affirmation, and there's part of you that's holding some subconscious belief that is to the contrary, that says, no, you're not worthy of love. No, it is wrong to have money. You're not spiritual if you charge for what you're worth, for example. And so one of the things that we'll be doing in this workshop is to help you craft an affirmation based on truth. And again, we go through this process to find out what is true for you so that these affirmations set up this vibration of resonance and allow you to manifest more in your life. So I invite you to pop over to Insight Timer and join the 30-day affirmation challenge. I think my next affirmation comes out tomorrow, July 14th, which is Bastille Day here in France. So that's kind of cool. And you can also listen to the past ones. Once you join on Insight Timer for free, you'll see that they've posted each day's affirmation. And so it's not too late. You can finish out the month of July strong. All right. And then if you'd like to, then join me for my private workshop on creating your personal success mantra, an affirmation for the soul, and use the coupon code mantra50 to get 50% off at checkout. All right. So I would love to see you there. I'm going to pop back over and see if there's any other questions. So Gelu says, sometimes our critic goes really vocal toward someone else's work. And although I can see and appreciate their effort and or the result, I find my critic on full speed to destroy the work or person. Wow, thank you for sharing that, Gelu. Gelu, I don't know, I keep going back and forth, hard G or soft G, Gelu. So it sounds like this would be a good time to investigate. What is that inner critic trying to protect you from? Do you find that criticizing someone else or identifying the flaws in someone else's work gives you a feeling of safety, maybe even superiority? Now, it may not be conscious. Of course, you have a big heart of compassion. Just like you said, you want to appreciate their effort, but there's this little part of you that's picking out the flaws. I would get to know that part. Ask that part, like, what's up? I can see the good in what they've done. Why are you picking out those little flaws or poking holes in their plans? Because sometimes we just find that it's another protective part that wants to point out things in the outside world. It could be a part of your shadow. You know, a lot of us have tried so hard to be perfect that maybe we've denied some of our dreams and goals. And that part of us that wants to go out, wants to do things, will often project anger or animosity onto other people, pointing out, well, ugh, I can't believe they did that, when secretly that part that's hidden in the shadow really wanted to do that itself. So I would just get curious, Jelu. I would get curious as to where that part is coming from. What's it trying to do? And is it trying to keep you safe or trying to keep you one ahead of someone else? Right? So, yeah, Crystal says, me too, but not so much picking at their flaws. It's more the self-deprecation. So get curious, find out where that comes from, and see if you can start to build up an inner compassion figure. You'll find that on the Insight Timer platform, I have a compassion meditation, compassion for self and others, that will train you on how to build up this feeling of compassion, even compassion for the parts of you that have been tearing you down, and forgiveness and gratitude. So check out that inner child or the compassion meditation that is really, really helpful at getting to the bottom of things. All right, make sense? All right. So I thank you all for joining me. I hope that this has been helpful, that this little conversation has provided you with some insight. I will also be live next Wednesday on Insight Timer, not here on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, just on the Insight Timer app, where we'll be exploring how to free yourself of negative self-talk, but specifically we'll be identifying specific elements of self-talk. I teach this in a resilience course, but I'm going to share some of that resilience course live on Insight Timer, just to give you some insights into what the research says, because yes, even though I'm no longer a perfectionist, I still have my little nerd part of me that loves research and loves seeing how psychological research can be applied. Did you know that I taught applied positive psychology at the International University of Monaco? Yeah, it's my jam. So awesome. I'm so glad to know that this has been helpful for you. I do hope that you will join me for the live workshop on Insight Timer. Cindy, good to have you here with us again, and you as well. Chuck, very grateful that you've been here. Glad to know that this was helpful. Thank you for tuning in. I do hope that you'll join me over on Insight Timer. It is a lovely platform, and yeah, I love the community there as well. I manage a little group over there about self-love and resilience. So you can pop over and connect with us there. Yeah? All right. So thank you. Very good to connect with you. Please, if this has been helpful, hit that like button, share this video with someone else, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or follow me on whichever platform that you follow me on. And great to see you, Joanna Soares. Glad that you made it, even if it's only for a moment. You can watch this replay on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter right away. But definitely come over and join me on Insight Timer. All right? So thank you. Thank you for being here. I so appreciate you. I appreciate this connection. You are helping me to fulfill my dharma, my soul's destiny, to inspire, to elevate consciousness, and to help us all reclaim our personal sovereignty. So until we meet again, please know this: you are a gift to this world. So share your presence with passion. Much love, everyone. Take good care.